You just have to pretty much have a lot of faith when you're signing things because you don't understand Thai. So you just have to trust that, okay, I'm signing all these documents. I hope that it's okay. And yeah, it has been okay, but you have to have a lot of trust in people.
Welcome to the Venture-Ette podcast, where women from all over the world share their stories of travel, moving abroad, and creating a new life for themselves, hoping to inspire you to live out your dreams by showing you how other women did it. I'm your host, Venture-Ette, Ashley.
Hello, welcome to Venture-Ette podcast. I'm Ashley, and I just want to say thank you so much for being here with me today. It truly means so much. I just want to go straight into it with you guys today. I am so happy to have my dear friend Megan on the show today. She is someone whom I met in 2015 when we were both living in Istanbul, Turkey. We were part of the same program, but teaching at different schools. She didn't stay very long in Istanbul, which you'll later find out why. But what I just love about Megan is that she is a planner and she is organized. When she sets her mind to something, she figures out every little detail. She does all the research. She asks the right questions. And because of this kind of mentality and this organization, I would say has a huge effect as to why she's been able to travel to over 70 countries on her own and has even lived in some of those countries, which includes like Thailand and Spain, Mexico, and of course, Turkey. And on top of that, she has done those once in a lifetime experiences that people dream about. She's gone to the panda sanctuary in China. She's gone hiking to look for mountain gorillas in Africa. I mean, the girl has done it all. I am just in awe of everything she's done. But what makes her just even better of a person is the fact that she is so humble. Most of our friendship has been separated. We've always been on different continents throughout the years, but she's someone who always reaches out to make sure that I'm okay and wants to know what's going on in my life, which really goes to show that it doesn't matter where you are in the world and what you're doing. It really truly is always about having that connection and having those friendships and relationships that really does make life worthwhile. And I'm just happy to have Megan on today's show to really just talk about how she's been able to do all the things she's done, and especially as a solo female traveler. Most people might say, that's not a good idea, that's not very safe. But honestly, as someone who has done it myself, it really is all about having common sense, making sure you do research, making sure that you don't put yourself in risky situations. So it really just comes down to just making sure that you know a little bit about what you're doing. Of course, there's always risk with anything you do involve, but I feel like that's life. So without further ado, I am so excited for you to hear Megan's story. I also want to point out that this was recorded a few months ago in January 2020 before, all the chaos in the world started. So keep that in mind and also make sure you stick around to the very end. I followed up with Megan recently to kind of just talk about how things are being handled in Bangkok, Thailand. That is currently where she's living. And I just thought maybe you want to know how things are being handled in different parts of the world. So enjoy.
Hi, Megan.
Hi, Ashley. Thank you so much for the introduction.
No, of course. I feel like people need to know just how amazing you are and what you've done. I mean, I feel like what you've done is so inspiring. So right now it's like January 2020, but like how long have you been living and traveling abroad now?
Well, I made the leap in June of 2014. I first moved to Mexico. I'm originally from the States, and I had been to Mexico a few times, stayed at all-inclusive resorts. So I had a little bit of a comfort knowing that it wasn't so far from home if things didn't go very well. And there have been many ups and downs, many different types of, jobs and studies that I've taken on, but that's really when it all began in June of 2014.
And it's crazy how fast 6 years go by, right? So you're from the States, you're from Wisconsin. So tell me a little bit more about like your life in Wisconsin. Like how was life growing up?
So originally, my profession was in veterinary nursing. So I worked with animals for quite a few years. Being from Wisconsin, I was herding cattle at one point, and I really enjoyed it. But I always felt for some reason that I didn't necessarily understand a lot of the American mentality. And I always felt like a little bit of an outsider. I loved watching travel shows. I was addicted to anything with Anthony Bourdain, loved learning about different foods around the world and cultures. And so I just always had this desire to go abroad and not necessarily just to travel for a week. I really wanted to immerse myself in another culture. And so after making some savings, finishing a second degree in international relations and economics, I decided to take a plunge. I had what we would call a quarter life crisis, where I ended my relationship, I quit my job, I sold my car, I put all my belongings on Craigslist, and I tried to figure out a way to start a new life in another country.
I totally understand. I went through the same thing too. I went through a quarter life crisis and I was like, what am I doing with my life? Especially after living such a stable and safe life for so long. But what was the actual breaking point? I mean, you had such a good career, you had like a good stable life, but what took you to that edge of being like, I need to make a change? You said quarter life crisis, but what exactly happened?
Well, when you're just going through the everyday of life, it can be quite mundane. And for some people, they really enjoy routine. But for me, that's almost like giving up on life. And I really felt like the pros of having a stable income, of having savings and having this furnished apartment, and kind of just looking like I had my life put together, when in the reality, I wasn't very satisfied with it. And unfortunately, the way that the system is in the US, we're not really allocated a lot of vacation time, compared to other countries where they at least get a month or 2 months off during the year. I had maximum 2 weeks. And I know that a lot of Americans can understand and relate to the fact that we get a lot of pressure put on us for even trying to take that time off. And so I knew that if I wanted to experience life in another country, I couldn't do it through a vacation. I would have to do something drastic. And because I did have so much savings, I felt like this was the perfect opportunity to try it. And if I didn't like it, then I could always go back home and start over. I had built up quite a few things on my CV, so I knew that I would always find employment. So I wasn't so concerned about that. And I felt like the risk of doing it wasn't so big, knowing that I could always return.
Mm-hmm. So like you had so much experience, working as a veterinary technician, but then, you wanted to move. So what did you decide to do in order to move abroad? And how did you decide that?
Well, I'm a very organized person and I love researching. So the first thing I did was try to look for different job websites, volunteering websites, ways that I could make an income living abroad. I was hoping to maybe get into like an NGO, work with animal welfare. Unfortunately, that is very niche at the moment. And it's also something that it's such a passion for many people that there are many people willing to do it for no pay. And so for me, trying to find a position that provided a stable income in that field was quite difficult. And so I tried to find out what is in demand. I mean, being an economics major, I know that, supply and demand, well, English teaching is the highest demand. Any country is really keen to have a native English speaker. I had never taught before. And so I didn't really want to just apply for jobs, not having the confidence of being able to step in front of a group of kids. I wanted to actually do a good job. I've always wanted to have pride in my profession. So I started searching out what are some teacher training programs. And I came across this program called the CELTA, offered through Cambridge. Cambridge offers a 1 month intensive teacher training program for ESL teachers. They offer it in almost, I would say, practically every country. They also offered it in the United States. I chose to do my teacher training in Mexico because I thought that it would be, and it did turn out to be very good for networking and finding a job. And so that's the route that I took. I jumped on a plane. I flew to Mexico City with all of my belongings in a backpack, and I was ready to start this 1-month teacher training program right in the heart of Mexico City.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I totally remember going through the similar thing where it's like, oh, teaching English. Okay, need to prepare. Okay, find a course and everything. But I mean, you said you had to sell your car and sell your things. So did you leave anything at all in storage, or did you actually get rid of everything before taking your backpack and going to Mexico City?
So, because I am an only child, my loving, loving parents were nice and they were able to keep some of my things in their basement. But I think actually, as my time has progressed abroad, I've become more and more of a minimalist. So, I don't even feel like any of those things that I have there I would really even need, or I don't really place as much value on those material possessions now. So, it is good that it's there if I ever need it, but I really don't feel like it is obligatory to have those things. They're just things at the end of the day. So I were to say, if you don't have a support network that's willing to take your things, just get rid of it all. I know quite a few people that have purchased a storage unit and then they've gone years and years and spent hundreds and maybe thousands of dollars on a unit and they think, why did I spend that money? I should have just gotten rid of everything. Just purge it all and start fresh because really they're just objects. So, yeah, that would be my suggestion. And that's the route that I took.
I completely agree because in the end, I mean, those are things you can always just get again, really. I feel people get so attached to all these things, because they feel like they really need it. But then over time, like you said, you realize, oh, I actually don't really need it. And if I actually really do, I mean, you can always just get it again, unless it's something very valuable, like maybe something passed down from the family. But other than that, everything else can be replaced. So you arrive in Mexico City with your backpack. So what happened? You did your training there, right?
Yeah, so I was with about 20 other students in this teacher training program, and I really felt like that was very helpful to me. It was a nice transition because I was able to have friends immediately and friends that were also going to go through the same challenges. It's a very intensive course. I mean, I had just finished university, but I felt like this was a lot more challenging than I ever imagined. I would say that if you were to do this course, you really couldn't have a job during that time. You have to do lots of teaching practice, you have to write lots of papers. It's very intense. But I had these, I guess, fellow students that we would bond together. Most of them were from Mexico, to be honest. They weren't coming from foreign countries. And so that was also really helpful because they helped me understand more about Mexican culture. They would take me out, show me the area. They came from different parts of Mexico. So that was also good for networking and looking at jobs. And for later in the year when I was living in Mexico, I could go visit them. So I felt like it was a smooth transition. I didn't just land in a country with no support network. I had these students that I was with that really helped me. I had a bond with them.
No, and that definitely makes such a huge difference when you have other people to connect with and create like a little family, together when you have left, your own family. So yeah, I totally agree. And I'm so glad that happened. So you did it and it was a month-long course, correct?
Yes.
So you finished the course and then what happened?
So in that time, I had been job searching. So I found a school in northern Mexico that it seemed to be a really good match for my teaching style, and the city seemed like that it would really suit my lifestyle. So I went to go see the school, and I was really happy with it. I feel like as a teacher, it's really important to have a good relationship and really see eye to eye with your teaching coordinator because you're going to be working so closely with them throughout the year that bond is very important. So I felt really good about it, but little did I know that was just the start of many challenges to come. Getting a work permit to teach in Mexico was much more challenging than I had ever anticipated. I actually find it quite ironic that there's such a negative connotation with Mexicans coming to the States to get jobs illegally. And there's all these memes out there and things just making fun of Mexicans when there's an equal amount of Americans working illegally in Mexico. We won't even jump into that. But let me just say that my employer was quite surprised that I said to him, I really want to work legally here. And he thought, that's the first time that he's ever had that proposition before, because
Wow.
most Americans work illegally in Mexico, which is surprising to me. So I wanted to go about it the legal route, which was very, very challenging, to say that, obviously there are some downfalls with our American government and our American system, but at least there's some sort of consistency. And you don't really see that as far as like the government in Mexico. There's a lot of inconsistencies. I would show up at immigration one day and they would say I would need X, Y, and Z. I would show up the next day with it and they would say I need A, B, and C. So they would just change what they wanted every day. I actually had to end up flying back home to the States to do my application at one point, and luckily my employer paid for that flight. But let me just say that it was not easy, and it took me a good 3 to 4 months to actually get the permit process like in effect, and about 6 months till I actually got the permit.
Wow, that is quite the process. And the fact that you even had to like fly back home to apply. But eventually you did get the permit, which is great. But then how was actually like living in Mexico? I mean, you are a white, blonde American woman living in Mexico. Did you feel out of place or uncomfortable at all? Or did you feel very welcomed?
Well, I would say I'm from the suburbs, but I did grow up right near Milwaukee. And unfortunately, Milwaukee's history, it is quite violent, quite segregated. And so just, walking at night, I was always just very vigilant. I would carry keys in between my fingers. I would always have a very tense feeling when I would walk at night in Wisconsin and Milwaukee. And I would tell you, Ashley, that I never had that feeling living in Querétaro, where it's where I was living, in this city in central Mexico. I never felt that way. And I'll tell you why. In Mexico, there is such a strong feeling of community there that at all times of night, you wouldn't have teenagers or hoodlums walking around the street. No, you would have little abuela, little grandma sitting out there on the corner with grandpa and all the kids, and they'd have music playing and everybody's drinking tequila or drinking some micheladas and having some food. There's always just this sense of family. So you don't really see barren streets where there's just teenagers walking amok. No, there's always this sense of family there. And I never really felt insecure walking in Mexico, being a blonde in Mexico. Sure, there was, catcalling. There's this idea of machismo where I'd have men try to flirt with me at all times of day, but I never crossed any sort of barrier where I felt very uncomfortable or threatened.
I completely agree, just because I'm a Mexican, and that feeling of community and family is such a big thing. And especially I feel like in smaller towns like where you were, you definitely get that feeling like even more. So you felt safe, but how was meeting people and like friends? I mean, a lot of people have a fear of moving somewhere else new because, they don't want to be alone. But how was making friends in Querétaro?
Well, in general, I would say that Mexicans are some of the most welcoming people that I've met of all my travels, of all the countries I've been to. I mean, I did obviously know quite a bit of Spanish, but all of my coworkers, my roommates, everyone would go out of their way to invite me to dinners, out for drinks. They always wanted to include me and make me feel like a part of the community. I'm still close with those teachers that I worked with, those roommates that I had. We've maintained connections throughout the years. People that are listening might say, Megan, why are you not there still? Unfortunately, because I am an economics major, I do think about budget and the way that salaries are right now in Mexico. It didn't really make a lot of sense for me to stay there long term. I was able to live off the salary that I made and travel within Mexico, but I was not able to save any money, and it wouldn't be good for international travel at this point. I know that Mexico is building, they're growing, they're expanding, and maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, that the economy will be different later on and they'll put a lot of value on teachers. But at this point, the way that things work, I didn't see that to be the smartest financial decision to stay there for that reason.
No, and which makes sense. I mean, you wanted to not just like live abroad, but really travel and see the world, and traveling within Mexico was great, but obviously you wanted more at the time. So, you realize this, okay, staying here is not the best idea. So then what did you decide to do next after Mexico?
So I started to kind of scourge the job websites for teaching English abroad. There are numerous. If anybody is keen, definitely there are so many different resources that list jobs. It's actually overwhelming, and that's something that I want to talk about, is that there's an overwhelming amount of job postings for teachers. The problem is there are so many bad contracts. So you have to be very, very keen, very, very, like, you have to almost be like a detective when you're researching these job postings. Look at forums, see how the school is ranked, see how the recruiting company is ranked, look for positive reviews, negative reviews, see what's out there before you agree to anything. I was looking on these sites and I found two jobs that stood out to me. One was in Turkey and one was in Thailand. I interviewed for both of them. I had never been to Turkey before. I'd never been to Thailand before, but something was drawing me to Istanbul. And so I got this job offer through a recruiting company to teach in Istanbul. And there were a few red flags, to be honest, but I put them aside because I was so new to this. They didn't stand out to me as much. And I just kind of went with it. And I flew to Istanbul, and that was the second teaching position that I took.
Yes, and that is where, we met, thankfully. But I want to talk a little bit about Istanbul because at the time when we both went, it was a very interesting time politically. Obviously, there was a lot of conflict going at the time. This was 2015. There was a lot of, terrorist attacks. I remember my family and friends felt very uneasy about me going. But how did your friends and family feel about you going to Istanbul at this time?
I would say that their level of apprehension for me going to Mexico was very high. So I don't think it changed with the idea of me going to Istanbul. I don't think they felt any less or more settled with the idea. They didn't have any more comfort, or they weren't more nervous for me because they had heard so many terrible things about Mexico. And I had made it a year with only great stories to show. So, I mean, they were obviously still praying for me, but they didn't feel any different about it than the time that I had been in Mexico.
I think, once you were in Mexico and you're like, okay, it makes sense that they would feel a lot better. But with my family, they were just like, oh, what are you doing? But obviously you get there and we both came to realize, it's really not like what people see on the media. But of course, there were some other struggles that were happening in Istanbul. So what happened when you got to Istanbul?
I would say that what I really took away from it is that as a teacher, I really don't like going with recruiting companies. In Mexico, I was able to focus in on the school that I wanted, in the city that I wanted, find my own apartment. I really had a lot of freedom and independence. But when you're with a recruiting company, which happens quite often in countries like, South Korea or Saudi, they provide a package. So the package includes maybe your flight there, your housing, your transport. You don't know what school you're going to be placed at. So a lot of the power is in their hands, and you have to be very trusting of their decision making. And I will say that this recruiter fell very short. They didn't follow through with a lot of their promises. I was personally placed in an apartment very, very far from my school. At least I was placed in Istanbul. I know other teachers that were placed in other parts of Turkey, and they really had no say in it. I can't remember the amount, but I know that 16 of us started and only 5 of us stayed. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes. And I was one of them, but yes, the majority did leave. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think any experience is a negative experience. I learned a lot from it, and it made me realize that I need to look with a fine-tooth comb at each contract and be aware what I'm signing myself up for, because there are a lot of really bad contracts out there. And so you have to be very cautious. So I was really happy with the decision to leave. I ended up taking that other position in Thailand that I had interviewed for back in Mexico. And I was so happy with it. I got in a school that I was really happy with, in a city that's actually incredible. And I mean, I ended up leaving and coming back. So obviously I love Bangkok, and I met these amazing people while living in Istanbul. So I never feel like it's a negative thing. I feel like trying it's better than not being too afraid to try it at all.
And I completely agree. And I just remember all of us, women that met in Istanbul, it was such a difficult time. It was just a difficult experience, but we did meet each other and we've had lasting friendships ever since. And I am so grateful for that. So I agree that it's worth trying than not trying at all. So you got a job in Bangkok, and like you said, you got there and everything was just so much better. But how was, day-to-day life in Bangkok compared to Mexico? Like, what did you find easy? What did you find difficult as well?
Yeah, so it's honestly shocking to see the difference between the value for teachers, how not the students, but how the government and the system values teachers in Asia versus in Latin America. I mean, everything was seamless. My visa process, the salary, everything was just much better in that regard. The students I had in Mexico were absolutely incredible, and they're kids that I still email to check up and see how they're doing. But likewise, the Thai students are so respectful and they really put teachers on a pedestal here. But as far as like the bureaucracy of everything, it was 1,000 times better than in Mexico. Everything's handled for you. You just have to pretty much have a lot of faith when you're signing things because you don't understand Thai. So you just have to trust that, okay, I'm signing all these documents. I hope that it's okay. And yeah, it has been okay. But you have to have a lot of trust in people.
No, yeah, you definitely do. And, I feel like we've both been very lucky that even though we've had some instances where it didn't always work out, we've always had good people that really helped us, through these type of processes. But one thing I want to address that we haven't done so yet. So moving from country to country, do you have to know that language in order to live and teach in that country?
No, as far as like job requirements, I have not really seen any postings that say, you need to be bilingual in the local language and English. No. And teaching English to students that don't understand the language is not a problem. You find ways with songs and actions, and you can really make it work. I think what really makes a difference is if you're in a major city versus a more rural city. I've only chosen like major cities. Querétaro had over 2 million people. It wasn't a small place. Istanbul's gigantic. Bangkok is very cosmopolitan. So I never felt like I needed to learn the language to function, but it does make you feel more connected to a place over time if you do want to stay there long term.
Yes. And also to even just like kind of communicate with people, like they do appreciate when you do take the time and effort to speak in their native language. But yeah, same here. Every country I've lived in, I've never had to really learn the language. I mean, I did kind of have to learn Turkish because I was more in a smaller suburb outside of Istanbul, but otherwise, yes. So you're in Bangkok, you stayed there for 1 year. You said it was seamless. So what did you decide to do after Bangkok? This was probably one of the biggest things I think you've ever done, in my opinion.
Sure. Well, I guess because I had been pent up for 25 years in the same state with pretty much every sort of familiarity possible, and I really loved getting to work in a country and get to know a country, but I thought to myself, oh my God, there's 195 countries, well, 197 depending who you talk to. I'm never going to be able to see a quantity of these countries if I spend 1 year in each place. So I decided to next not go to another 1 year contract, but try to see as many of these bucket list places that I wanted to. So I planned out a year of backpacking. I saw over 30 countries in 12 months. Planned it all out before I left. And yeah, just spent 12 months seeing the world. I was in Eastern Europe. I was in Eastern Africa. I was camping for 3 months. I went all throughout Central America. I was up in Canada. I mean, I saw the gambit, definitely. And it was one of those experiences that, like anything, has its incredible highs where you're seeing these places that are just mind blowing. You're just totally wowed by the beauty of the world. But then at the same time, I got to a point where I was like not having a purpose and I was feeling like almost numb. I couldn't even take in all the beauty anymore. So I would say cautionary. 12 months was quite a long time to just be traveling and to be traveling at such a pace. It definitely had some cons in the long term.
Yes, and I remember you telling me about these things. It's just kind of like, yes, it's exciting, but then also, what is the purpose of it all? But I want to kind of backtrack to when you were planning it because, you had lived already in 3 different countries and done some traveling. So it's like, how did you plan, especially kind of like financially, to be able to travel and backpack for a whole year?
Sure. I mean, I think what people find surprising is that I afforded it on a teacher's salary. Yes, I did have savings in my account back in the States, but if you don't spend a lot of money on accommodation, living day to day is very, very affordable in any part of the world that's not, the States or Canada or, Australia or maybe some parts of Western Europe. If you avoid those areas, you can get by on $1,000 a month easily, which is less than I was spending back in the US. So to summarize, I think aside from a few like bucket list things I did, I think I spent around 15,000 for a whole year, which is nothing. It's pennies compared to what I was spending to maintain my lifestyle back in Wisconsin.
That's honestly like incredible. But yeah, people really think that, oh, to travel, you need to spend very lavishly and go to very expensive things. But yeah, when you think about it, like the necessities to get by day really doesn't cost a lot. So I guess what were some of the basic things that you just focused on spending your money on?
I think the most expensive things would be flights and visas and like bucket list experiences with animals. I'm a huge animal lover being a vet nurse. So, yeah, I wanted to do anything where I could volunteer with animals or see animals in the wild. And it's quite interesting because before I actually started doing this on my own, I just looked at Pinterest and Instagram stories and just like, wow, these people are seeing whale sharks, they're seeing pandas, they're seeing elephants. And sadly, like the more experiences that I've had doing those things, the less I want to do them now because tourism is such a business and I feel like the animals aren't treated as well as I would like them to be. So I'm not as big of an advocate of doing those things anymore. So yeah, that's where most of my money was spent on initially. But like the day to day, I could easily spend $5 on a hostel. I would maybe go out for one meal, but then I would buy groceries at the local grocery store and cook my own meal at the place I was staying. So day to day costs were not very expensive.
Yeah, I feel like eating out, I feel is the biggest, culprit of like spending a lot. But yeah, if you go to the grocery store and like cook your own meals, it definitely makes traveling like more affordable. But I guess, you traveled and you saw all these amazing animals, but what was ultimately the most difficult thing about traveling for a full year on your own?
I guess I just got a little bit of fatigue from, I met so many incredible people, incredible travelers, people that were locals, but every day it was somebody new. And so when you don't really have roots and you don't really have stable friendships or stable relationships with people, you feel almost like totally disconnected from the world. And so I was feeling like I need to have a home base again. I need to have stable friends. I need to find somewhere where I can have some sort of roots now. I was just feeling too nomadic.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I have definitely felt that way before where it's just kind of like, okay, you want like a home base in your own little community. So you traveled for a full year and then you made another big life decision, which ended up being the second place and I think the last place we saw each other. So what did you decide to do next?
Well, I guess I had two options at the time in my mind. I thought either I could sign another contract, but then I thought to myself, maybe if I get another degree, something related to teaching, I could find better positions. I could find jobs with a higher salary, maybe, just being a budget minded person, economics major, I'm always thinking, okay, well, how could I make this more worthwhile, worth my time for savings? So I decided to apply to a few graduate schools in Europe because I know that in the States, graduate school is insanely expensive and I didn't really want to go into any debt. So I got into a university in Barcelona, and it was a program in linguistics. And so I agreed to go there. You always have to trust your gut with these things. And my gut, after corresponding with the linguistics department at the university, I wasn't feeling so good about it, but I thought, okay, well, I'll just see when I get there. I already accepted this position. Everybody around me is telling me that it's such a good opportunity. So I'm just going to go with what they're telling me. And unfortunately, that kind of backfired. It really wasn't the best program for me personally. Not to say it's not a good university or a good program for other people, but it wasn't the best decision for me, just like in Istanbul. But that's okay. I had an incredible time. I was able to travel in Europe and make lots of good connections while I was there and see you again. So again, you always have to see the positive in everything.
Exactly. And it's one of those things where, you did it, you put the best effort you could, and then ultimately you figured out, okay, this isn't right for me. So you ended up staying in Barcelona for how long?
I stayed there for a year. I had been trying to find a job there, but similar to Latin America, the economy in Spain is not doing so well as far as teaching jobs compared to the cost of living in Barcelona. And so even if I were to find something, I don't even know if it necessarily would have given me as much savings as I had when I was working in Bangkok.
Yeah, and that was a thing that I also struggled with the first time I moved to Barcelona. It's very difficult to find a job, even when you do have a student visa. There was just more paperwork that was required. It was just the things that they wanted from you just didn't have. And it's just like, how am I supposed to work even though I have a student visa? I mean, you even did VIP Kid, right?
I did. So yeah, I started teaching online as a way to supplement my income. However, as a teacher, you're an independent contractor, so you're not guaranteed any hours. So I would say it's okay for some extra cash, but it's definitely not like you don't have that comfort of knowing a certain salary that you're going to get every month. It can fluctuate depending on, if they have vacations or yeah, you really never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's the thing with VIP Kid. I mean, like I personally have been very lucky and have been able to be somewhat consistent with the bookings, but I feel like it's kind of like a luck of the draw with some of these private contracting positions. So you stuck it out in Barcelona, and then eventually you decided that you needed a break.
Yeah, because I had been backpacking for that year and then tried to make it work in Barcelona and I still wasn't feeling connected. I felt like I need to figure out what my next move is going to be, but I don't want to do anything drastic. I just need to be around something familiar again. I decided to actually move back home. I'm very close with my parents. I hadn't lived at home, to be honest, since I was 17 when I graduated high school. Most Americans move out of their parents' house when they're 17, but here I was at 30 years old and going back home to live with my parents just to kind of figure out what my next move was going to be. Was it to move back home? Was it to transition back to life in the States? I just needed to figure it out, and I knew that I could have the luxury of time with my parents because they've always been so supportive of me.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I know that not everyone has, a supportive family base, but you are very lucky that you do have that. So, you moved back home to Wisconsin. So, what did you end up doing in your time at home?
So, a few things that I found funny. It was kind of exciting initially after living abroad to have those familiar things that I was used to, baseball games, everybody speaking English. How funny is that? I didn't realize how accustomed I was to not understanding anything happening around me. And then I go back home and I can understand all the conversations happening around me. And that was something that I hadn't had in so many years. So that was actually a shock. I was eavesdropping on everybody. But yeah, just to be able to go to Target, just everything was so much easier in your home country. You understand like the cultural norms, you understand what's acceptable. You don't have to like put in a lot of extra effort to understand what's happening or how to act in every situation. But honestly, after a few months, I got a little not bored, but I understood, and it made me realize again why I had chosen to move abroad because I do like the excitement of it. I do like the kind of people that I meet when I travel. I love all these experiences, not knowing what's going to happen every day. And so after being home about 4 months, I said to myself that okay, I need to transition abroad again. I had signed a 1-year contract back in Wisconsin to teach there. So I wanted to fulfill my contract just so my CV looked a little bit stable. But I knew that as soon as that finished, that I wanted to go back abroad again.
It's funny. So I just wanted to go back when you said about when you went back to Wisconsin, you could understand everyone. Everyone was speaking English. I went through the same thing coming back to the US. I was like, oh, wow, I understand everyone. And I was also eavesdropping. So it's really funny and interesting how you kind of take that for granted and forget about that. It's just like, oh, yeah, everyone speaks English here. But yeah, so you stayed home for a year and then you ultimately decided to, okay, time to go back abroad. So how did you go about it this time?
So, teaching in the US, I chose to teach at an inner city school. It was quite stressful for me. I had over 30 students. I felt like every day was struggle was very real. I give teachers back in the States so much credit for what they do, for how much they're compensated. It's a very undervalued profession in the US. So, after teaching for 12 months, I said to myself, I need a break before I start teaching again. So I decided, just like when I was 25, to pack up all my belongings in one backpack and I was going to just travel in Europe. This time I chose to travel in the Balkans because I hadn't been to any of those countries yet. And then as I was traveling, I was also applying to jobs in cities that I already knew. So this time around, I didn't want to get a job in a place I didn't know. I was trying to look for places that I knew I liked, places that I could see myself long term, places that I had friends already. I just didn't want to start over again. I wanted a little familiarity
Why did you want that this time around?
because I had been traveling every year to new places and I was getting really like emotionally fatigued from trying to just meet new people. I just wanted I couldn't take it again. In the beginning it was so exciting. It was so exciting to have a fresh start, but now I just said to myself, I just want stable friendships, stable connections, and I don't want to arrive in a city and realize it's not for me long term. I want to go somewhere where I know I could stay and make friends long term. So that's why I chose Bangkok. I looked at Kuala Lumpur. I really liked that city a lot. I looked at Singapore. I looked at Mexico City, hoping that maybe I could find higher paid positions. Unfortunately, even international schools, they were lovely, but not anywhere near what I was making in Asia.
Yeah, Asia, it's amazing. I mean, if you ever want to teach English, Asia is definitely the best place to go to if you want to make good money. So you traveled, around the Balkans for the summer, but I really want to tell everyone the story as to how you got the job in Bangkok and how you went back to Bangkok, because to this day, it just blows my mind as to how it all came about.
I would say it's very cutthroat and things happen very fast in the teaching profession abroad. So, like, if you're an American and you're applying to a job, you'll probably hear back within a week and they'll give you some time to respond. No, no, no. If you're applying for a teaching job in another country, it's not uncommon for them to see your CV, message you immediately back, try to set up an interview within like that day or right now, immediately. They just want to get the ball rolling. They are so keen. And so I saw this posting when I was in Ukraine for a job in Bangkok, and the package looked phenomenal. The vacation time looked great. It was an area of Bangkok that I was really keen to live in. And I put my CV out there. And not only that, they were hoping to find somebody very quickly. They had a teacher that had quit and the school year had just started. So they really were in an emergency. And I said to them, I'm in Ukraine, but I'm willing to fly out right then and there. And they messaged me back saying, whoa, 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 hold on, hold on. Let's actually interview each other and have a conversation before you book a flight. But they were excited that I was so keen on coming and I was so interested. So yeah, we had a Skype interview within 24 hours. 24 hours later, they said, we have to interview a few other candidates, but we'll let you know within 24 hours. So yeah, I was in Odessa, Ukraine, in southern Ukraine, and I got the email saying, we want to offer this to you. It was Thursday, almost Friday morning. Could you fly out by the weekend? I said, yep, sounds great. So within an hour, I had booked a flight to fly out 24 hours later from Kiev. I had to figure out a bus or a train to get up to Kiev and fly to Bangkok. And on Sunday morning, I landed in Bangkok and I started work on Monday morning.
It still blows my mind that happened, because I will never forget the day, that Thursday. Oh, I have an interview today. And then I think the next day you messaged me, oh, I got it. I'm going to fly out this weekend. And then I was just like, what? But you did it. And ultimately, so now you are back in Bangkok teaching. So how do you find Bangkok at this time around? Like teaching, social life, everything.
Well, a few of my friends stayed, so I had some connections from the last time. Bangkok has westernized much more than the last time I lived here, so I feel almost zero culture shock living here. It's easy to find any cuisine. The cost of living is still relatively low compared to the salaries. It's easy to meet people. There's great resources for meetups. It's just a great city to find events for everything. You don't have to be somebody that's a partier. You can find language meetups, dancing, yoga, meditation, cooking. Every interest you have, you can find it here. So it's just an exciting city. It's a very convenient city at any time of day. There's so many restaurants open 24 hours. The streets are always busy. You never feel unsettled. I actually have a friend who's from Delhi, and we went out yesterday, and she lived across the river, and it's going on midnight. And she posted something on Insta like, she just feels so amazing that after 20 years living in a country like India, where you're so on edge, coming to Bangkok, feeling like you can walk home at midnight on your own and feel so comfortable as a woman here. It brings me a peace of mind. I don't get catcalled here. I feel very comfortable. I can wear tank tops, I can wear shorts, and I never feel objectified.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that as well too, being in Southeast Asia. I never felt objectified as well. And I just felt very comfortable no matter the time of day. Bangkok is an amazing city, so much going on. But is there anything that you struggle with at all living in Bangkok?
I would say for the long term, I think the struggle for me is going to be maintaining friendships because it is a transient city. And so I'm trying to make steps to find friends that are from Thailand or consider Thailand to be like maybe their long term home, because I don't really want a high turnover of my friends and relationships. I'm really trying to invest in those right now. I've maintained lots of friendships with people all over the world, but it is nice to have a stable network of people that I can call up to get brunch or a coffee. So I would say that's the hardest thing. But other than that, I have absolutely no complaints about the lifestyle and the mentality of the Thai people. Very respectful, very positive, very laid back. It's an easy place to live.
Yeah, that's one thing I love about Southeast Asia, and especially like Thai people. And also when I was in Vietnam, is that they are just so friendly. And like you said, it's very easygoing and laid back. But I totally know what you mean about living in transient cities. That's always been the biggest struggle for myself, is that you meet people, but then you have to say bye at some point. So I guess you're enjoying your time in Bangkok, but what do you see next for yourself, or what are you hoping for yourself in the next year or so?
That's an interesting question. I think that my mindset's changed quite a bit. I've always been a forward thinker. I think it makes me, positive and optimistic about the future because I do feel like I understand that I am privileged with my passport, being a native English speaker, that I have so many options, right? I know that if things don't go well with this job, there's hundreds of jobs in Bangkok, there's hundreds of jobs in Thailand. People always looking for native English speakers. So I never worried about job security. But at the same time, I'm also not really setting long term goals because I know that things can always change as far as my mindset. I know that, last year I was living in the States and I had an idea that I wanted to move abroad, but I couldn't have ever fathomed that I would have this job in this city and have this lifestyle already built for myself. So I kind of like leaving things open ended, and there are so many endless possibilities. I like that. I don't really want to make a narrow focus because I feel like it might shut doors for me and opportunities that could present themselves that I might want to take later on.
And I think that's the best way to look at it. And also too, I feel like when you do plan, it's not like things can't not go according to plan, but there's definitely many times where things don't go according to plan. And then it's like, oh, what do you do? So it's sometimes just kind of better to just kind of see how things go and see what feels right in the moment and just kind of make a decision based on that. But I guess my next question is, what is something that you would tell your 2014 self What is something you would tell that person now, knowing what you know now?
Well, I think what is quite unique to the American mindset and the American mentality is that your profession and your job defines you. So I would say that living back in the States, I put so much pressure and focus on my position, my career. I know one of the first things that people ask you when they meet you in the States is, hey, how are you? Oh, my name's so and so. Where are you from? What's your job? And that's just common in the States. But in other parts of the world, that's not so common. Your career changes so much throughout your life. And I think one thing I've learned from living abroad and traveling abroad is that I'm more than my job. I offer so much to the world that I don't get paid for. And so I have less stress on myself about how my career defines me. It doesn't. I know that it's going to change and I can offer people so much more than just my job. So I think for me, it's taken a lot of pressure off myself, and I feel a lot less stress and anxiety living abroad than I do in the States. And it was actually surprising how quickly that stress came back living back in Wisconsin last year. Within a few months, I already started to feel this pressure of just listening to people around me talk and just the kind of mentality it is about, your job is everything, it's everything, when really, I mean, it's only a small part of what you can offer the world. And there are so many, I don't want to swear, but BS jobs in the world where people really aren't really doing anything they think that they're adding value. I mean, they make a paycheck, but they think, what am I doing? I don't agree with my job. Yeah, it makes me money, but I don't really like it. So I think what's important to also just know that you can find purpose and you can find value in your life outside of your career too. I know that it brings me so much joy being a good friend. It brings me so much joy, helping others, helping animals, doing things that I don't necessarily get paid for. So I feel like that's something I've learned is just not to put so much pressure on myself for my career.
And I totally, totally understand because I've been back in the US for about 8 months now. And I definitely feel that pressure. And I've gotten that pressure about, what do you do or what are you doing or what are you going to be doing? Like, what is your goal for your career, for your job? And that was something that I avoided for so long. And so then coming back and feeling that pressure again, I'm like, oh my God, like, it really gives me a bit of anxiety, but you're so right. There's so much more to us as humans than our job. Like, we have so much more to offer. And I feel like people really do need to remember that. And sometimes, honestly, I forget that as well. So thank you for that because you were speaking and I just thought, yes, yes.
Yeah. I mean, of course, like I didn't mention, but ever since I moved abroad, I've been writing a travel blog. I write a post for each city that I visit. I've also taken a position as a content manager for an animal welfare organization. I do their Instagram and help out with their social media. But the one question I get from most Americans is, oh, how much do you make? How do you monetize your blog? How much do you make for that content position? I said, I don't make anything, but it brings me so much more than money. So there are other things that bring you fulfillment that don't necessarily have a dollar value on them.
Yeah, money does not lead to happiness. I feel like we hear that a lot, but we forget that. And I just feel like it's, like you said, what you feel like you contribute to the world. Like that is what really does bring happiness and satisfaction to oneself, is just what you can bring to the world. And you don't have to get paid for it. But I mean, you've done so much. You've traveled so much. And I mean, the list goes on. So I guess if someone else was looking to do something similar to what you have done, what is the one biggest advice that you would give to that person?
I would say that the one big regret I have is not starting this sooner. I wanted to do this so long, and I thought, I've met people like that are 21, 22 that are traveling all over the world, and I thought, oh my God, I didn't even leave Wisconsin until I was 25. The biggest regret I have is that I waited so long. So I would say, like, if you are considering this, know that nothing ever falls into your lap. Nobody said to me, hey, Megan, I'm going to offer you this great job in Mexico, or I'm going to do this program in Mexico. You should do it. Nobody said that to me. I had to seek it out on my own. I had to search out the opportunity. So I had to take the leap. But I also always knew that if I didn't like it, I could go back. I could fail and still go back to what I always knew. So I would say, like, if anybody's interested, just try it. Say, I'm going to give it 6 months or 12 months, I can always start my life back again in the States or wherever you're coming from. Jobs are always going to be out there. So I would just say do it. The stars are not always going to align. And sometimes you're going to always have apprehensions and you just have to make the jump anyway.
I think that's definitely well said. I feel a lot of people fear that things aren't going to work out, or if they commit and they tell everyone they're going to do something and then it doesn't work out, they fear having to come back and say, oh, it didn't work out. But it's one of those things that, if it doesn't work out, you can try again. Obviously, you've done it so many times where things didn't work out and things weren't going your way. But you kept going. Now you're going on 6. I think you're going on 7 years now.
I think that was something that I feared a lot. Was even this past year, I went back home and then just telling people that I wanted to go abroad again. They're like, but I thought you already did that. I thought you already tried that. And I said, but I'm going to do it again. Life's a journey. When you give up on your dreams, then you're giving up on life. And I haven't given up on life. I want to still have these amazing, incredible experiences and keep challenging myself and never feel like you should be doing things based on what other people think you should be doing. Do things based on what feels right to you.
Exactly. And if things don't work out the first time, doesn't mean that it might not work out the second time. You can try again and again. I know I've also had to go back to the States for a short period of time, and then I moved abroad again because I really wanted it. So I agree. If you really want to do it, you can just try again and again, and don't let any setbacks, get to you. So I totally agree. I just want to thank you so much, Megan. Your story is so inspiring. You really do inspire me so much with what you've done. And I'm just so glad that we are still friends, even though we've always been on 2 different continents the last few years.
Yeah, I think having a network of people that are going through similar struggles is really important, especially for single women. I think that that's something, if you are a solo female, that you really need to have a network of strong women that you can bond with and feel empowered by. And I'm really glad that we've maintained that. And I think it's even greater that we're living in other parts of the world because our experiences on the day-to-day are very different.
Yeah, even though our experiences day to day are very different, I feel like we usually do go through similar things on bigger terms. But I feel like that's why we've always been able to stay connected and still have so much in common. So I'm so grateful for that. So thank you again, Megan, so much. And I definitely look forward to having more talks with you.
Thanks for having me on, Ashley.
So I reached out to Megan again recently because I really wanted to get an update as to how things are going on in Thailand. So I'm really happy that she agreed to get together again via Zoom and talk about what's going on in Thailand and how she's dealing through everything. So hi, Megan.
Hello.
So what has been your kind of day-to-day over these last few weeks since, the outbreak happened?
Sure. It's been a really interesting experience watching everything unfold here in Thailand. I would say that we first started hearing about the virus back in January, February. And at the time, Thailand wasn't really taking it seriously at all. They weren't doing any testing. They were letting tourists fly in from all over the country, but mainly China, actually, because they had been celebrating their New Year. So a lot of people were going on holiday and they were spending that holiday in Thailand. So lots of Chinese tourists in Thailand during that time. The government really wasn't taking anything seriously in February or March. And then all of a sudden, end of March, I think Thailand just decided to start cracking down in all aspects. I've been working from home. I'm a teacher. I've been working from home for about a month now. So it's been going okay. I work with a little bit of an older group, so we're able to do sessions on Zoom. I am still able to go outside for essential goods. I can still walk outside. Unfortunately, all of the public parks are closed. Our gyms and pools are closed. So, you have pretty limited options. Most recently, they've shut down travel domestically within Thailand. So it's really difficult. There are no buses going anywhere, no trains. You really can't go from province to province. So you're pretty much stuck in the city that you're in. And then they introduced a curfew. So we have a 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. curfew. And they also decided to ban alcohol. And so that's been going on for the past almost 2 weeks now. Initially, it was for a festival. They wanted to discourage people from gathering socially. And then they just decided to extend it. So I guess I've been really amazed by the adaptability of humans and how I've been able to quickly change my lifestyle to suit all these new restrictions. But I do think that the way that our country is handling it here is very different than my home country. And just the response from the citizens of Thailand is very different than in the US on the whole.
Yeah, no, it's definitely very different. But I feel like many countries around the end of March, did the same thing of really just locking down the country and really enforcing social distancing. So I think in that way it's been similar. But, of course, here in the US, which is your home country, there still hasn't been a curfew. There hasn't been any alcohol ban. If that were to happen here, I think people would just lose it. But because the festival that was happening this month was Songkran, right? Basically like the New Year in Thailand.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was utter chaos. It was actually pretty poorly planned, to be honest, because they gave us about 4 hours notice. So everybody basically flooded the stores. There was lines out the door to get as much alcohol as people could to stock up. So that really went against social distancing because people panicked. So I don't think it was the best decision for them to do that, to be honest. I mean, people now, they can just drink at home. They have a supply. But I mean, I understand their intention, but it definitely backfired.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of this, when countries or officials make some sort of announcement like we're stopping this or you need to fly home or whatever, it just really just asks for crowds to get together and just not social distance, which obviously does not help given the situation. So I know you're teaching like online, but how has that been like for your school? Because you teach at an international school.
I would say that I am under a lot more stress and pressure than I normally am because normally I deal with the children during the day and my children are lovely and I just love planning really fun activities for them. But now it's mostly dealing with parents because all of our communication is through them. So it does put me under a lot of pressure and stress. They have access to me at all times, unfortunately, because of our smart devices. So I do feel like it's hard to disconnect from work. But I have been hearing that's pretty common among most people now with working from home. That's a big challenge for them is when to shut off work life and when to actually, have some time for yourself when your new work environment is your home environment.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand just trying to find the balance or trying to do something where you can kind of just have time for yourself and then time to work. But I mean, at least, the school is making an effort to obviously still like keep their teachers and, keeping the classes going. So I'm sure that's a definitely added bonus that you can actually stay and work there than having to leave and, fly home to the US.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, flying home for me was never appealing. It was never a good idea in my mind because I'm employed here in Thailand. I think that people that are here on a tourist visa are really struggling right now. And as a worker here, I have very good health care. If I ever get sick from COVID or anything, I'm fully covered for my work. So if I were to go back to the US and I were to get sick, it would cost me maybe $30,000, which I've seen is the average. Where here I have zero expenses and the healthcare is very good here in Thailand. In Bangkok, especially, the hospitals are top notch. People fly here from other countries for their services. So I don't feel afraid at all if I were to get sick. And I do think on the whole, Thais are very respectful of the guidelines. People were wearing masks even before this happened. They respect distancing in general. People are not very close to each other here in the city. It's just more cultural thing as well. People they're sanitizing all the time. And so I think that's good. But if you were a tourist here, initially there was a huge struggle for visa exceptions. People were running out of time. They couldn't leave Thailand, but they were having to queue up at immigration. My friend was there almost 9 hours one time just trying to get her extension she needed because there were so many people. And how can you socially distance in that kind of a place when there's just crowds? Fortunately, after a month or so, they've now made all exceptions until the end of July. So if you're a tourist, you're okay now. But for the first month, it was pretty utter chaos for people trying to scramble and figure out where to go to avoid penalties of fines of overstaying here in the country.
Yeah, no, that's really great because I feel like there have been quite a few countries that have done that, making an exception. Like I know Indonesia, they did that as well, where they just kind of gave like a free extension to people that were, staying there on a tourist visa. And it just really goes to show just kind of like how the people are in these different cultures and stuff, how respectful they are and just understanding the situation that not everyone can really fly home. So I think that's really great that the Thai government did that and that people are able to stay at least through July without any penalties.
Sure, yeah. Unfortunately, though, what I think is really a significant difference is, well, I mean, in the US and Thailand, there's obviously corruption in both countries, but the way that corruption's handled in those countries is very different. So, for example, here in Thailand, one of the main orders by our prime minister was that there was to be no rumor spreading. So, if you were to be talking negatively about Thailand or any of these decisions, if you were really kind of going against what they were saying, you could be prosecuted for that. So I think in the US, it's all about we have the right to say no, we have the right to protest, but here there are consequences if you do that. So you really can't be defiant and just have to be obedient. Otherwise, you could either face jail time or a huge fine.
Yeah, I remember that it was like that too when, the king was alive, that you couldn't say anything bad about him or the royal family as well, because if you did, you would also get arrested or fined or something. So I think just based off that, people have learned right away that you have to be respectful of the government and, the country. So it makes sense. And honestly, I feel like sometimes that kind of needs to just happen here.
Yeah, I mean, there have been a few things that stood out to me. I mean, on the whole, I think it's very positive, and I'm very blessed that I can find masks everywhere. That's all I see every day when I'm at the shop is masks for sale. When I hear about shortages in other countries, I just don't know how. I mean, it's a non-issue here. There's a plethora of masks and sanitizer everywhere that you walk into a store. There's multiple free bottles for you to use. Every store you walk into, they're checking your temperature and they give you a sticker if you pass. So that's a non-issue. Some things that have been really sad to me here is because obviously a lot of people, they were already struggling financially, and to close their business or to completely remove tourists, really people that serve food, people that are street vendors, they're really struggling right now to survive. And one thing that's been really disheartening is that the government has been breaking up food distribution centers. They say that we have to have social distancing, we can't have these kind of food distribution centers. So people that are poor, really, we can't have these. The temples had been doing this where they've been, serving a bunch of food to people that can't afford to eat. But then the police would come and say, we can't have this kind of a gathering. And then it would make them leave and take all the food. So those kind of things are sad to see. And then I would say with the curfew, it's been really interesting to see that homeless people have been getting arrested and fined here for being out after curfew when they have no home. People that live on the street, maybe they're crossing the street to go use the toilet. There's not an actual toilet, but the police find them. They try to fine them or put them in jail. People are in jail right now that are homeless for breaking curfew. So I mean, it's laughable. It's really upsetting, but also laughable that they don't take into consideration that some people don't have a home here. So, yeah, I mean, I understand the government's intention of these kind of things, but some of the enforcement of it is a little concerning. So,
no, that's honestly just devastating to hear. I mean, I could only imagine if that were happening here with Portland having such a major, homeless problem. But I mean, how is the testing? Because I just read somewhere that there's only been 2,800 cases in Thailand and 50 deaths. So I just want to know if that's around the same number you've heard, or how's the testing been handled over there?
Yeah, I mean, I would take any statistic with a grain of salt, to be honest. I would not take it seriously. I think any published numbers are just nonsense, to be honest. They don't really take into account how many people are actually sick but can't afford to go and get tested, or they're afraid to go and get tested. So I think it's dramatically underestimated. But I do feel like that was the case back in January and February. I feel like I had coronavirus back in February. I got deathly ill for about 2 weeks and I didn't know why. I didn't go to the doctor. I just kind of dealt with it. But I think you don't really know. You don't really know what the real numbers are, I would say.
No, I agree. I just feel like, yeah, the numbers are constantly being thrown out. So I just want to know, like, what does Thailand look like in the future? Because, have you seen anything about them? I think you said something about how they're going to extend like the curfew or make it longer. Do you know anything, how much longer they're going to enforce social distancing?
On the whole, the country had this quarantine period that was supposed to go until April 30th, which would be next Thursday. And so on Monday or Tuesday, the government is going to get together and they're going to discuss whether they want to start easing up restrictions or what their plan of attack is. There's obviously concern that as soon as you start easing up restrictions, that the cases are going to increase. But at the same time, the government here gave everybody that was unemployed or struggling 5,000 baht for this first month to offset whatever financial loss they've, incurred. But they can't afford to pay the country's citizens more than 1 month. They just said they can't. So it's also logistic or financially, they can't afford to keep the country locked down too much longer. They can't afford to pay the people to stay at home. I think if they do keep the people at home, but they're not able to pay them to help them feed themselves, then they're going to have other issues of starvation and other diseases that arise from this aside from COVID. So I guess we'll find out what will happen about next Thursday. I know that 2 airlines are going to start operating domestic flights again starting on May 1st. I know that there's already a list of restrictions. Obviously, you have to wear a mask on the flight. They're not going to serve any food. You can't eat or drink anything because then you would be removing your mask. But we'll see how that goes as well. I'm starting to have domestic flights. I am very blessed that once we do get the option to travel a little within Thailand, I mean, it's a paradise and it's probably even more of a paradise right now. You're seeing all these beautiful effects from the low tourist numbers, how clean our water is and clean our air is. It's probably going to be incredible to go to some of these beaches and islands without anybody there. I'm looking forward to that for sure.
Yeah, no, I definitely really can't wait for the day for just like the world to open up again. But it'll be interesting to see once people are let out into the world, how our earth changes again. Probably not in the best way, but I guess for the time being, we can just, admire the beauty that is happening around the world in terms of just places being cleaner and less pollution, right? So I can only hope that things, of course, just get better, not just in Thailand, but around the world. But I just really want to thank you for your time and just, kind of giving an update as to how things are in Thailand and for you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashley. It was great speaking with you.
For more information on travel and life abroad, go to Venture-Ette.com. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know by leaving a review. And be sure to follow me at Venture-Ette on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Safe travels, and until next time.